Hello everybody. This is a video on suffering. Suffering has many forms. There is the suffering you get from injury, there is the suffering you get from disease, and there is the suffering you have from life's existence. According to the Buddhists, life is suffering, and the suffering the Buddhists were referring to is the suffering of expectation. When in life you're always expecting things. And when you expect something, it's never quite as it turns out as you thought it would. And this always causes you some suffering because you expected this and you got that. Now, the Buddhist philosophy on dealing with suffering is mindfulness. Be mindful of your suffering. Try to not want. Of course, in life, this is just about impossible not to want, and several Buddhist masters also teach that wanting to not want is also wanting. So how do you eliminate want? You don't. You learn to live with it. And how do you learn to live with it? Well, this is the tough part. Meditation is what is recommended, where you spend some quiet time on your own without any thoughts going through your head, and you get accustomed to who you are. And as you get accustomed to who you are, well, then you become more in tune with yourself, and as you become more in tune with yourself, you become more acceptant of yourself. And I believe that is the key to avoid this suffering from expectation. To allow yourself to want, to allow yourself to expect, and when it all turns out that you don't get what you expect, well, then you accept it more if you are in tune with yourself. The suffering that comes from other aspects that are not anticipation, for example, the suffering that comes from disease, that is a different thing altogether, because that is suffering that is, well, quite horrendous, really. And there's not much that can be done about it. You just have to go through it. I mean, you can take medication, which thank heavens we have nowadays, because in the old days I think to myself, how could people have gone through those times where when they had suffering and there was nothing to ail their suffering, they just sat there and bared it. That must have been horrendous. Now we have some sorts of medication which help relieve the suffering, but there is still suffering. And how to deal with the suffering is the only thing you can do is accept it. That's the only thing you can do. You must accept suffering as another teacher in life. From suffering, you get new perspectives on the way things are, and you try to relieve your outlook somehow. There's not much that can be done about suffering. It's just acceptance. And however you look at it, if it's your turn to go through suffering, there's not much you can do. Just accept that it's another phase in life. It's got its own meanings, and you've got to grin and bear it. Well, maybe without the grin. Just bear it. And suffering passes. All suffering passes, even if it is death that separates you from your suffering. So all suffering is temporary. But of course, death, the solution, well, if you're suffering enough, death won't seem like such a bad thing. Thank you for watching.